Well, we're finally here one day before the Bazball Ashes. The teams have gone through their final preparations at Edgbaston. We know the England 11, Australia have one big decision still to make over their bowling attack. We'll start with England. Vish, they've gone with James Anderson, Stuart Broad, Ollie Robinson as their three frontline quicks for this game. No Mark Wood. What do you make of that decision?
I think it's a strange decision. I think it probably goes against some of the values that England have spoken about over the last year in terms of winning the next game, winning the game in front of them, and also just setting the tone from the off. If we take maybe an in-game example of how you'd approach a series, they always talk about, you know, starting basically in fifth gear, and it feels like England are not doing that by not picking Mark Wood, I suppose, because it seems like they're saving him for Lords, given that they left the final day of the Ireland Test, which was day 3, a little bit wary about how flat the pitch was, recently relayed, and the fact that the Dukes wasn't doing as much, despite the fact that it's a better Dukes than last year. And I think because of that, they come into this and thought, well, Broad's on form. Ideally, their main starting three is Anderson, Robinson, Wood, but because Broad's on form, because they want to maybe hold on to Wood a bit more, they've gone with this. And it's hard to debate it because, you know, there's over 1,200, 300 wickets there maybe. But there is an element, you know, from an England's perspective, and when you talk about the Ashes, we think back to 2021, 22, and there's an element of, it's all a bit samey, isn't it? But I think I've talked myself round enough, you know, to think they're doing the right thing over the course of 24 hours, certainly.
Well, Ben Stokes was asked today how much of a factor David Warner was in Stuart Broad's selection. He said he'd be lying if it said it wasn't a factor. It was put to Pat Cummins as well. How ready is David Warner? Of course, all eyes are on him. After he's sort of mapped out the end point of his Test career, he wants to finish in Sydney early next year. Still a question mark over whether he'll get there. These first two Tests of this series might play a key part in that. He had one decent score and a low score in the World Test Championship final at Edgbaston. So that rivalry will resume in the first Test here, which it didn't obviously do 18 months ago in Australia when, as Vish mentioned, neither Anderson or Broad played that first Test. Vish, I guess the other key point around England's bowling attack is Ben Stokes' knee. He's given us another update today. It sounds promising. How much do you think we'll see in this Test match of Ben Stokes with the ball?
That is a very good question, because as much as he is someone I would like to believe, and I think his entire ethos is getting people to believe in him unequivocally, you saw the amount of strapping on his left knee. Just when he was doing press, you couldn't help but fixated by it, because
everyone's staring at his knee.
Yeah, it was strange, you know. His eyes are up here. But you know, he's bowled over the last 3 days. He's bowled certainly with more vigour than I've seen in quite a while. Certainly since the start of the year, I suppose, when he threw the New Zealand series there. And I think what he says and how it turns out will end up being two very different things, because I think if they can avoid it, they should, because I think now he sees that as a duty to the rest of his team. He spoke in Wellington quite emotionally about how he couldn't play a full part, and that seemed to hurt him in some way. And I think I'm worried, certainly, that his way of making amends is to do something at this point in time, which is quite silly, such as, you know, bowling for a 10-over stint, which I suppose brings Moeen Ali into the equation here. And again, the worry with Moeen Ali is if he has the capacity, the endurance to bowl as many overs as Leach would have done in a day's play. So, you know, we probably will see him, but I think we'll probably only see him in the second innings. So in Australia's second innings, that is, yeah.
You've also been quite taken by Harry Brooks bowling in the lead-up to this game. You've been keeping a close eye on his medium paces. He has one Test wicket to his name, Kane Williamson, if I remember correctly, from that series in New Zealand. So whether Harry Brooks becomes England's secret weapon in this series, we wait to see. I mean, for the first time in a long time in Ashes in England, Australia have an all-rounder at number 6, Cameron Green, who played obviously in the 2021-22 Ashes in Australia, where he's still feeling his way into national cricket a bit. In the last 6 months, he scored a maiden Test 100 and taken a first 5-wicket haul back at the MCG against South Africa. So that gives Australia a luxury of basically able to pick a 5-man attack. We're still waiting to find out who that fifth and final person is who slots in. Pat Cummins obviously playing, Nathan Lyon plays, Cameron Green, as I've mentioned, plays. One of Mitchell Starc, Josh Hazlewood and Scott Boland won't play, and that fits into the good problems to have for a selection group, but it is an intriguing decision. You've got Scott Boland, who's taken 33 wickets at 15 in 8 tests. You've got Mitchell Starc, 300 wickets, and you've got Josh Hazlewood, 222 wickets at about 25 with 30 odd in England at 23. Depending on how you pick up hints from the nets today, and it could mean something, it could mean nothing. There's some people who think it'll actually be Starc and Hazlewood that play. I just personally think it's very hard to leave out Scott Boland. He seems to be a man with a Midas touch at the moment. Vish, you've, I guess, had an eye on Australia from a bit more of a distance over the last few months. I mean, would you be surprised if they left Scott Boland out of this Test match?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to me, it feels like, just as you said, watching from the outside. To me, it feels like the decision to be made is Starc or Hazlewood. And I was just thinking, just there while you were talking about it, one of the things that England need basically is rough for Moeen to spin out of. So does that take Starc out of the equation? Is that a factor at all?
Well, I mean, they like Starc for the advantage it gives Lyon. I mean, when Lyon and Starc play Test matches together, Lyon's record, which is fantastic, 486 Test wickets now after the World Test Championship final, but they do like the rough that Starc's create. And there is an argument as well that if you have a point of difference, then play it. And there is some thought that actually an attacking bowler like Starc versus an attacking batting lineup of England might actually have its advantages too. But if you think about the bowlers Australia have, and now they have Cameron Green as another right arm fast medium, you do think if you have Mitchell Starc, left armour, excellent with reverse swing, which might be a factor here. The outfield is very green, but there is a little bit of wear on the square, and it has been warm here the last few days. So those will be the things that Australia are weighing up about their fast attack. Yeah, I mean, Boland again, just going back to me, just he feels a man who can make an impact. He has a bit of a Stuart Broad quality about him in that he takes wickets in multiple wickets in an over. He's done it 6 times in 8 Test matches. So we'll see in the next 24 hours who makes that starting 11 for Australia. I guess the final point to touch on, Vish, as we do head into the Ashes after what's actually been quite a short build-up, but felt like a very long one.
Yes,
for this Ashes. Will Bazball work against Australia? Without sounding like Steve Smith, it is going to be their toughest challenge. Australia are not a side with many holes to pick in it, barring probably David Warner's form at the top there. England aren't going to back down. We've heard Ben Stokes talk about it again today. Harry Brook yesterday going, yeah, I'm going to charge Nathan Lyon. To ask you how it's going to play out is unfair because I don't think any of us know. But this England team is clearly not short on belief. Do you think we'll see ultra Bazball, or do you think they'll actually bring a bit of nuance against this Australian team, knowing how good Australia are?
Well, they've shown nuance, all throughout this period. The run rate has stolen the headlines. A number of times we talk about Gilbert Jessup whenever Harry Brook walks out to bat.
Pops up every week, that chap.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He's doing a roaring trade. I think the thing I'm interested to look out for, and the thing that essentially the series will rest on, is the endurance, the stamina of Bazball. Because this is the most important series they played at that time. Because it is, Ashes series are that to an English cricketer. That's just how it is, yeah. It's also the longest series that they would have played in this era. And it will be the most intense because there will be so many more eyes on it, so much more scrutiny as well. And not just from you and I. In fact, the you and I part of it doesn't matter. I think one of the...
Don't say that too loudly.
I think one of the key things about the way England are playing is that they've never felt closer to the supporter. And what they're going to be closer to this summer is supporters who haven't really been following it for a while, know it's quite fun, but also know it's the Ashes and would always turn up for the Ashes. And their opinions are a little bit louder. The place in the space in the paper is a little bit bigger. It's earlier on your news, earlier on your radio stations. It is more important, and it's how they deal with that. It's easy to deal with that when it's, with all due respect, New Zealand or 3 tests against South Africa when the Premier League season's up and running. This is very, very different, and that I think is going to be the biggest challenge. Is just keeping that mental stamina, just being unequivocal with your belief, over the space of 5 weeks, and that'll be the biggest challenge for them.
Well, we can't wait for it to start. We'll be back each night of the Test and the series to bring you analysis from what happens on the field. It could be anything. It's probably going to be spectacular, and it could be something. It could be the best Ashes series since 2005, and you can follow it all on ESPNcricinfo.com.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.